Tell me about growing up in a pharmacist family.
Pharmacist family.
Pharmacist.
It was great. When I was a boy, I could go into my grandfather's drugstore and eat all the candy that I wanted in the candy case. Then when I was in junior high school in the summer between the 8th and 9th grade, I rode my bicycle to my grandpa's drugstore, and he taught me how to make things at the soda fountain, and I had my first experience serving customers at his soda fountain. He had a small drugstore. My father...
Where was the drugstore?
The drugstore was in North Minneapolis on the corner of James and Plymouth Avenue North.
Is it still there?
No, I don't think so. My father worked for someone at a drugstore in South Minneapolis, and that was a small drugstore too, and it was a long drive because we lived in North Minneapolis. But my father eventually, when I was about 7 or 8 years old, was able to buy that drugstore, and eventually when I got to junior high school, in about the 8th or 9th grade in the summer, I worked at that drugstore, my father's drugstore, and by that time he was able to make it a little bit bigger, so it was a slightly larger drugstore. Then eventually he expanded it some more. It had a nice soda fountain when he bought it, and he expanded that into a larger room. He bought a small business that went out of business next to the drugstore, and he put in a lunch counter, and so I had to learn how to make sandwiches and things.
Oh, that's why you're good at it.
Yeah, well, yeah. And also, of course, at my grandfather's drugstore, I learned how to make malted milks and milkshakes and different flavors of Coca-Cola that people would buy glasses of. Like, I know we sold a lot of lemon Coke. It would be Coke with a little bit of lemon in it that people seemed to like at the time, and then there was cherry Coke. Anyway, when I got to high school, I'd go down after high school a couple days a week and work at the drugstore and then drive home with my dad. And when I was a senior in high school...
what high school did you go to?
I went to North High School in Minneapolis, graduated at from North High School in Minneapolis. And when I was in my senior year, the last part of the senior year, my father bought me a car. It was a Henry J. automobile. And they haven't made those for years. This would have been 1950, 1951. And I was able to drive to the drugstore at night to work, and my father was able, the drugstore was doing pretty well, so he was able to hire a pharmacist. Howard Lindsay was his name, and Howard and his wife lived in Minneapolis, but lived near, not too far from where we lived in North Minneapolis. It was on my way, so I would pick, and Howard didn't have a car, and so because he worked at St. Mary's Hospital at the time as a pharmacist there, and he during the daytime, and then he'd work a few nights a week at my dad's drugstore. I'd pick him up after school, and we would go to my dad's drugstore, and my dad would go home, and then I'd go home after Howard locked up the drugstore, and drive Howard back to his home, and then I would drive on to our home in North Minneapolis. And I thought at one time I might want to be a pharmacist, even though I was very ambivalent about it. And I took high school chemistry and I got a B. And I remember my mother saying that the chemistry teacher, Mr. Palm, he thought that if I did want to be a pharmacist, I should probably study harder and become an A student in chemistry. And that never happened. So when I got to the University of Minnesota, I did take inorganic chemistry and qualitative analysis, and I got B's and C's, and the medical students and pharmacy students that were in my class, they would be getting A's. And in the meantime, I really liked sociology and psychology and even the English courses I was taking. And my parents seemed very accepting of whatever I wanted to do, although my grandfather was a pharmacist, still a pharmacist in my first years in college. And I had two uncles, my mother's two brothers, who were both pharmacists. And so I knew that pharmacy and medicine and dentistry had high status in the community that we were living in. And so I still kind of stuck with it. But when I took organic chemistry, I ran into big trouble and I flunked it. And it was after that that I decided to major in psychology and minor in sociology, and that eventually led me to a career in social work.